friends. So sorry about that. Thank you for your patience, and we're really excited to be with you. My name is Rayanne Passantino. I am the Assistant Director of the Family Justice Center Alliance. And on behalf of Casey Gwynn and Gail Strack, our fearless leaders of Alliance for Hope International, we are super excited to be with you today, and we welcome you to our webinar. Our topic today is an introduction to survivor wealth and wellness by Tanya Ventura. Webinar download reminders. These are really important so to make this experience easier for you and for you to be able to share it later. The presentation is being recorded and it will be posted to our website. You will receive an email with instructions on how to download and view all of the materials and how to access your certificate of attendance. And if you have questions that come up throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them. We will compile them, and then time permitting at the end, we will go through questions and then have our presenters ask them. So please feel free to submit as many questions as you're able. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to Office on Violence Against Women who are supporting, who support our project and are supporting this webinar. Our wonderful HOPE team, we are just very proud to be able to work together to provide webinars like this, TA across the country, Camp Hope, and all the other programs that Alliance for Hope International supports and sponsors. Our wonderful conference is coming up. If you haven't registered, please do. The hotel's filling up May 19th through 21st in wonderful San Diego, and there is a director's pre-conference on May 18th. So we will be reaching out to Family Justice Center directors soon. So I'm very excited on behalf of the Alliance to introduce our presenter, Tanya Ventura. Tanya is a Los Angeles native, daughter of immigrants, queer Latina, and survivor herself. She has dedicated her studies and career to supporting marginalized communities achieve economic and social liberation. Tanya received her master's from Pepperdine University in 2016. She joined Freeform in February 2017 and launched a small business entrepreneurship for survivors of domestic violence. 100% of the businesses created from this program made a profit in their first month of operation. In April 2018, she supported the launch of Gifted by Freeform, a social enterprise focused on generating survivor wealth through entrepreneurship and living wage employment. She is now piloting a new program called the Survivor Wealth and Wellness Training and Certification aimed to integrate financial capacity, building into the gender-based violence movement by supporting service providers working with survivors of gender-based violence. Tanya is passionate about undoing the shame, judgment, challenges, and fear that we as survivors and people of color experience when accessing wealth and creating safe futures for ourselves and families. Tanya?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Leanne. Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya Ventura. I also have my colleague Sabrina here who will briefly introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Ham. I'm the policy specialist at Freeform. I recently joined the team last winter, and I will be sharing a little bit more about our system change strategy.
Thank you, Sabrina. So we are very excited to talk to you all today about survivor wealth and wellness. So before we get started, I'd like to make sure that we're all talking the same language. I know we use a whole bunch of different rhetoric and a whole bunch of different terms for the work that we do, so I just kind of wanted to briefly mention the language that we use so that nobody is confused and we all feel like we're talking about the same thing. So we tend to use a lot of gender-inclusive language, so that just means that it's inclusive of all genders. We use people-centered language, so that means that we like to center a person's humanity first. So we'll say people who experience violence, who are undocumented, who are LGBTQ+, versus things like disabled people or survivors, just saying survivors sometimes. And that's just because we want to really center people's humanity first and any other factor as just part of their identity, understanding that people's identities are complex and one thing does not fully define them. So that's why we typically say people or person or folks who have experienced gender-based violence. Again, that's a little bit of the being gender inclusive and centering a person's humanity. If you ever see Latinx or Latinx with an S at the end, that's just a gender inclusive way to say Latino or Latina. When we talk about entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship, we're really talking about anyone who is starting a new business, organization, or even working on their own accord. So we're not talking about anything super fancy, just pretty much anyone who is starting a new business, organization, or working on their own. We typically use they, them, theirs pronouns for pronouns instead of she, her, hers, or he, him, his, just to be gender inclusive. When it comes to talking about people who cause harm, we talk about them as harm doers or people who cause harm, because we understand the complexities of gender-based violence and that harm doers are often survivors themselves. And we also like to just use that term instead of perp or abuser throughout the webinar. GBV is an acronym for gender-based violence. If you see that anywhere in the presentation, that's what we mean. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick grounding. So close your eyes if you want to. You don't have to. Take a few deep breaths. Sit comfortably or choose a body position that feels good. Check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Do some more breathing. What are you bringing with you? And what are you leaving behind? And when you're ready, come back to the room or to where you're seated or to the screen, and let's get started. So I always like to start presentations with these two questions. We're going to be talking about finances and wealth and money in this presentation. So you don't have to necessarily respond. If you want to, you're more than welcome to respond in the Q&A. But this is more just for yourself. But I want you to answer these two questions in your mind, on a notebook, in the Q&A, wherever. What does financial freedom look like to you? And have you ever felt financially free? If yes, what did that feel like? So I'll give you all about a minute to think through that. Okay, thank you everybody for thinking through those two. And the reason why I like to ask these questions is because you might be thinking, you know, and you might be realizing that wealth and wellness look different for different people. Trauma and inequality have a big impact in what we define as wealth and what we define as wellness and our financial freedom experiences. People who have experienced gender-based violence have specific financial income challenges related to the trauma and harm they endured. So that may really impact someone's access, impact someone's definition, impact someone's experience with wealth. And specifically, people who've experienced intimate partner violence incur an average of $52,242 in lost wages over a lifetime. So that means that if you've experienced intimate partner violence, this is how much money you may have lost in wages due to the violence. And we'll get into a little bit about why that is and how that happens. The lifetime cost of intimate partner violence, including the cost of related to health problems, lost productivity, and criminal justice costs, is $103,767 for women and $23,414 for men. So that's significant. So this is over a lifetime. So for some of us, that can be a couple of years of salary. People, that can be one whole year of a salary. It really depends, but it's quite a significant amount that folks who have experienced intimate partner violence lose over a lifetime just due to the violence that they've experienced. Financial insecurity is the #1 reason why people who experience gender-based violence return to an abusive relationship or enter a new abusive relationship. So folks are reporting that their inability to stay financially secure and safe, they can't afford safety, is the #1 reason why they return or enter into a new relationship. Intimate partner violence and mental health are the leading cause of homelessness and incarceration of women, children, and youth, all of which cause more challenges and financial insecurity. So we're seeing folks who've experienced violence already experience a lot of financial insecurity, and then plus they may start now experiencing homelessness and incarceration, which then creates even more financial insecurity and challenges. So it kind of snowballs and starts getting more and more complicated, and it becomes harder and harder to access health and wellness. Now we're going to talk a little bit about service providers. So Los Angeles service providers, so we're based out in LA. So we're starting to do some work with service providers in understanding the movement and how can we as an organization support service providers in creating financial capacity building. So we've polled about 50 folks working in the movement here in LA. And we found that Los Angeles service providers working in the gender-based violence movement make an average of $37,500 a year. And this is a combination of folks in management and non-management. The average credit card debt that service providers carried from month to month was $6,563. So if you do the math, many of them have more debt than they make income. And then we also found that 68% of service providers identify as people who've experienced gender-based violence. So what this all tells us is for people who experience gender-based violence, especially women and trans women of color, the bridge between wealth and wellness is broken and it needs to be repaired. So this is what we do at Free From. We really focus on creating bridges and opportunities for survivors of gender-based violence to create economic stability so that they can live lives free from violence. We specifically work to discuss and address economic abuse. Economic abuse happens in 99% of all gender-based violence reported cases. So that means that 99% of survivors report experiencing economic abuse when asked about it. So what is that? Financial or economic abuse occurs when a harm doer exerts or maintains control over a survivor's financial resources in order to render the survivor financially dependent on the harm doer. Economic abuse can take many forms, which includes preventing a survivor from obtaining or maintaining employment, taking a survivor's paycheck and putting the survivor on an allowance or a very strict allowance, heavily monitoring spending, so that can be how much money you're using, how much money you're making, and really, really tracking that heavily and consistently. It could also be taking out credit cards in the survivor's name, whether it's oftentimes without the survivor knowing or without that person giving consent of the harm doer taking out credit cards, which often leaves survivors with debt and a lot of financial instability. So I want to give you some more examples of the nexus between survivorship and financial insecurity. So what this really means, the nexus between survivorship and financial insecurity, is all the slides, all the facts that I just presented kind of show that there's this overlap in relationship between being a survivor and being financially insecure. So we're going to jump into some more examples about what that looks like. So people who survived or experienced gender-based violence sometimes have not been allowed to work by the person that caused them harm, leaving them with little to no work history or making or acquiring traditional employment difficult. So as you can imagine, when entering the work field, they often have to start at the bottom with unfavorable work conditions not conducive to their healing journey. So we've heard from the folks and the survivors that we worked with that sometimes entering the workforce can feel a lot like there's a lot of power and control dynamics playing out, whether that's with managers, whether that's with directors, whether that's just the company in general might not feel very safe and can trigger a lot of the trauma that person is actively trying to heal. So when you think about folks who've had to leave their job and now have to start all over, it can be very difficult to navigate some of those situations. Survivors who become service providers working in the gender-based violence often feel called to do this work because of their experience. I know for a lot of us, we want to sort of give back. We want to make our experience help others through our experience. However, most service providers in the gender-based violence movement work 50-plus hours a week, are paid minimum or close to minimum wage. Service providers have not been afforded the opportunity to heal or build economic safety, yet are tasked with ending gender-based violence. So we have, busy work days. We are in charge of so many people. Many of us case manage a lot of folks or are in drop-in services or on the hotline or whatever it may be. We see a lot of folks. We're supporting a lot of folks. I think at Free From we trust that service providers are taking care of the people that they are serving, so are taking care of clients very, very well. But we often ask ourselves who's taking care of the service provider, especially if they are a survivor themselves. Have they been afforded the opportunity to heal? Are they feeling financially insecure themselves? And one thing that we're learning is, yes, a lot of service providers are feeling financially insecure, are feeling like they haven't been able to heal. A lot of them feel like, how am I supposed to help somebody build economic opportunity when I myself am struggling and challenged in acquiring financial safety? For folks who are undocumented or immigrants to the U.S. may have little knowledge on how to participate in our economy. So the U.S. economy is very complex. Some of us are still trying to figure it out. So if you can imagine being a person who's not from the U.S., coming to the U.S. and to a place where the economy is so important, it can be very, very difficult. So some folks may be fleeing war, corrupt governments, or financial institutions have become a place of power and abuse, so there might be some mistrust in banks and creditors and anybody who's pretty much working in a financial institution. Others come from countries where credit has completely different meaning or purpose. So we're very, very credit-focused society, so you need credit for an apartment, to get a car, sometimes to even get a phone or a laptop, and that can be really, really foreign experience to folks who are coming from different countries. Many have to navigate misconceptions about what financial institutions they have access to depending on their undocumented status. So a lot of folks don't know if they have the ability to bank, if they have the ability to take out credit, if they have the ability to, get an apartment, get a car because of their undocumented status. So they have to navigate a lot of those misconceptions and always worry about safety, disclosing I'm undocumented, I need this resource, this financial resource. Don't know if I have access to it, but asking can put me in danger. So just that whole experience can offer a lot of financial challenges and access challenges. Some financial challenges that you may have heard in the last slide, so I'm going to just kind of recap. Housing and community. So access to housing and community we see as a financial challenge. So that means maybe they have a person has shelter for temporary time, but what happens when that shelter term ends? Maybe they receive a voucher, maybe they receive some support with housing, but even that sometimes ends, and that can be very difficult. So acquiring housing can be very difficult. And when you're moving, whether it is for safety reasons or because you're trying to find housing, building community can be very, very difficult. And many of us know that building community really allows you to tap into resources, into a network of support that is very, very important in building economic stability and safety. Debt is a huge one. So we heard a little bit about the service providers and how much debt they're coming in with. We also polled clients, and they're coming in with about the same amount of debt. However, the difference there is that many of them have debt that is fraudulent. So that means that a harm doer, a family member, or somebody who was harming them took out debt in their name that they didn't have knowledge of or didn't give consent of or were forced to give consent, so therefore it's not consent. So they have a lot of debt that oftentimes feels like I can't do anything about this, and it can be really, really difficult to feel like you'll ever overcome that debt when it's that much of a fraudulent situation. Banking can be difficult, especially if you're moving around, if you don't have a job or stable income. A lot of folks find that, when they leave a situation or when they're trying to change banks, they've racked up a lot of banking fees, so whether that's because of overdrafts or, other little, like maybe you're not depositing enough money, but those banking fees can actually harm a person's ability to then move banks or find a new bank, because banks keep track of your records. They have like your own, it's almost like a credit report, but just for banks. So it can be difficult to get banking that helps your money stay safe if you have, had challenges with banking before. A lot of people have to choose between public benefits and a living wage. The public benefits afford people some support, so it can afford child care, it can afford medical coverage at no to little cost. And sometimes when that person starts creating a living wage, those public benefits start to fall off or start to no longer be available to that person, and that can be a very, very difficult choice to make, right? So I'm choosing between having a living wage, but now having to pay $1,000, $2,000 in child care. So it kind of cancels each other out. So folks are often having to sit with this decision of I don't want to make too much money because I want to be eligible for some public benefit, but also is it more worth making a living wage? And, that's a very difficult situation to be in and a very difficult decision to come to. Child care is a huge financial challenge for many people. Child care can afford folks the ability to work, can afford folks the ability to create income, to go to doctor's appointments, to go to therapy, all of these important things that help create financial security and stability. Court and family law can be very difficult, so it's not often, it is often that survivors tell us, I'm starting to earn income, but I'm worried that the parent of my children is going to find out about this income and, want to get some child support for me or, change the terms of our agreement, and having to navigate that and being very conscious of the income that they're bringing in and how that can really play out in their family situation or agreements that they have. Medical challenges can be very difficult if you don't have medical insurance. For folks who are undocumented, that's even more challenging because anything that pops up as medical will be very expensive. And folks who are undocumented already have a lot of difficulties in accessing income, accessing banking, accessing all these financial assets. So when a medical situation happens, it can really, really harm a survivor's ability to recover financially. Savings can be very difficult when you're living day to day, when you don't know if you're going to have enough income to support you that day or the next day. So if you're having problems accessing a bank account, then it's going to be even harder to access a savings account. So savings can be very difficult for survivors when they have such limited resources. And we've really found that savings make a big deal in allowing survivors to grow their economic security. So if you think about it, you have, let's say you get a flat tire. So now you have to buy a new tire. That's probably going to cost you minimum like $200, $400. If that person doesn't have the savings for that, then that might mean, well, now I lost my car because I can't afford to fix that tire. Losing my car can mean losing my job, and it can just, again, snowball and create more and more financial insecurity. So having a little bit of savings really allows survivors to continue to create financial security as they flourish, but savings can be difficult when you don't have income or a place to put them. Credit is similar to debt. So when you're experiencing a lot of debt, when you're experiencing a lot of fraudulent debt, it can be very, very difficult to have a higher credit score, which allows you to have access to apartments, to cars, to all these assets that you may need to create safety. So for example, some folks want to live in a neighborhood with a school that they really want their children to go to, but maybe can't afford to live in that neighborhood, or maybe they can afford to live in that neighborhood, but their credit score is pretty low, so getting an apartment in that district is not going to allow them to get an apartment there. So when you think about what does wealth and wellness and safety look like for people, maybe for that person, getting into a certain school, into a certain school district is will make them feel safer, will make them feel more like their wealth and wellness is balanced. And sometimes having a credit score that doesn't allow that can be difficult to navigating and accessing the wealth and wellness that's meaningful to you. So we're starting to understand why survivor wealth is so important. And I hope that you all are starting to understand why survivor wealth is so important. Yet when in the same poll that we're currently doing, 88% of clients that they receive zero support with managing money, debt, credit, or even finding a job with the service providers and the organizations that we're working with. So we all understand, why this is important. Yet for some reason, these services are not being offered yet. So how do we, the movement, begin to invest in survivor wealth and wellness? So think about that for a moment. And I think we all have different jobs that we do within the movement. And all of these jobs are so important, but I think there's a little bit that we can all do to really support survivors create wealth and wellness that affords them security and affords them safety and affords them long-term healing and stability. So one of the things that Free From did is we took some time to really learn about survivors and how they experience economic challenges and what economic strategies make the most impact in a survivor's life. We talked to a lot of survivors, probably over 150 survivors through all our programs, and really learned about what they were experiencing and created what we call the Survivor Economic Experience Model. So the Survivor Economic Experience Model breaks up survivorship into 4 stages. These stages are crisis, survival, growth, and thriving. And what these stages mean is that folks are in different stages of this model at different stages of their journey. So that means maybe someone left an abusive relationship, maybe someone chose to stay but is just coming to terms with the fact that they are in an abusive relationship and want to kind of start addressing that. So there might be somewhere in this model. It's not exclusively, so you're not always going to be exclusively in one category. What you'll find is sometimes someone's income is in one category, someone's saving is in one category, someone's debt and assets might be in another one. For some people, they are exclusively in one. For some are kind of teetering between 2. They're going back and forth. But really, this is a way for us to kind of think about, what are the challenges happening and what can we do to support survivors get to thriving, which is ultimately the last stage here where we find folks really being able to afford safety and being able to stay safe, whether they choose to stay or choose to leave. Having certain things allows them to feel safe and allows them to feel like they're prioritizing their healing and in some way ending the generational cycle of violence. So let's get into it. So crisis is the first stage, and typically here we see no income and no assets. So what we mean by assets is phone, car, furniture, jewelry, pretty much anything that can afford people some sort of economic value. So whether that's, a car has economic value, but it also gives you access to childcare, or it gives you access to employment. It's also like things that you can possibly sell if you need to, or things that allow you to, run your business, like a laptop or a cell phone, just different types of assets. We typically see no savings here, so that means that that person doesn't have savings or hasn't been able to save, or if they did, they lost those savings, but they have no savings at this stage. They have a significant amount of debt, or debt that they have just no way of addressing. So the debt really feels like it's just this giant rock in your path that you can't overcome. So without income, without savings, and a significant amount of debt, some of the best strategies there is to get somebody income as quickly as possible so that they can enter survival. So in survival, you have some income, but it's still not enough. So that might mean that that person maybe now has public benefits, or it might mean that they found a part-time job, or it might mean that they're starting their own business, or they're starting to work for themselves, so they're going the entrepreneurship route. But for some reason, that income is still not enough. So it's not covering daily expenses or monthly expenses. So that means that they're unable to save. So that means that savings are still not being able to be met because that person is not making enough income. There's still quite a bit of debt, so if you're not making enough income, you're not saving, and you're probably not addressing debt. So debt is very, very difficult to address. Savings is very difficult to create when one or the other exists. So if debt exists, it's going to be very difficult to save. If not enough income exists, then it's going to be very difficult to do both. So the next step here is obviously continuing to grow that person's income so they can get to a place where it feels like it's enough, and they can start saving and addressing that debt, which is growth. So in growth, income exceeds expenses, so that means that it might be just like $20 or $50, but at least now they're making minimum what they need to cover expenses. This means that they might have limited savings, so this might look like $40, $100, but very, very limited, oftentimes still not enough to cover an emergency. And then debt is starting to be addressed. Maybe not fully, but maybe folks are now able to at least make minimum payments, or they're starting to be able to pay utility bills that they have, been able to not address for a while, but it's starting to be engaged with. So that means that debt is starting to get paid off, not fully, but little by little. And before I get to thriving, I think one of the important things between crisis, survival, and growth is that because there is no to limited savings, it's very, very easy to get knocked down back to one of the previous stages. So let's say you finally made it to growth, but your car breaks down. That's going to cost you $1,000. You don't have those $1,000, so now you have to tap into your income in a way that is probably going to put you back down to survival. So it means that now your income might not be enough. Now you have no savings because the little of savings that you made have to be used towards this emergency, and now your debt isn't being addressed because you don't have enough income because of this emergency. So an emergency can easily knock somebody down back to one of the previous stages. When you get to thriving, that's really when this starts to not happen. So income exceeds expenses and some. So that means that you are abundantly feeling like you have significant money, but also have excess. So what this means is that you are able to create a consistent saving habit, which leads to a good enough savings that you can easily manage an emergency if that pops up. And then the big change that happens here with debt and credit is that instead of you feeling like you are constantly paying it off or constantly, struggling with this giant rock in your path, now instead you start seeing credit as a thing that affords you opportunity. So you start leveraging credit. Credit starts working for you. So that may look like folks being able to pay off their debt entirely and now use credit as a way to access assets. And what I mean by that is a person may now be able to save $800 for a phone, and instead of paying it, in cash, they might use their credit card to pay for that phone. and then pay off that debt on the phone from that credit card really quickly. So now the credit score is going up. You're able to use credit in a way that helps you long term. So now that we've kind of covered the survivor economic experience model, I want you to think about where you are in the model. And again, you might not be like specifically in one category. You can be in many categories at a time, but I really want you to think about, where am I? And then I want you to think about, where might your clients be in this economic experience model? So I'll give you a couple moments. Thank you, everybody, for thinking through that. So now let's talk about wealth and wellness. So as service providers, why do we fear or avoid financial conversations? There might be a lot of reasons. Again, feel free to sit with this question, write it out, type it in the Q&A, think about it later. But some of the things that we hear a lot is it feels too personal or too scary. There are a lot of cultural beliefs around money. So for example, it's a private matter. We don't really talk about it. Who am I to tell somebody anything about money? So again, this comes from service providers themselves feeling financially insecure. How can I support somebody in feeling financially insecure? Secure when I'm feeling financially insecure. And a lot of us have our own financial trauma. So again, a lot of us are survivors working in the movement with our own financial trauma. So again, 99% of survivors experience economic abuse. So obviously that's going to come out in sometimes the work that we do. So somebody talking about money can trigger some of our own financial trauma. And maybe we haven't had time to sit with our own financial trauma, or we haven't been able to heal that. And that can really create some fear or avoidance around financial conversations. But what are we missing when we avoid money talk, or what we call money talk? We're really missing the ability to address economic abuse. So if we're not asking about it, if we're not talking about it, economic abuse can continue to go unnoticed and get worse. So for example, let's say somebody has had a lot of fraudulent credit taken out in their name, but they have no knowledge of it because they've never checked the credit report, don't know how to check the credit report, don't even know how to start looking into that. Our inability or fear or avoidance of this conversation can allow that economic abuse to continue, even when that person is in shelter with us or receiving services with us, which can really, really hurt the long-term trajectory of that person's financial journey. Opportunities for economic growth can go untapped or untalked about. So if that person maybe has a really great business idea, or they have a ton of experience, work experience in a certain career, if we're not talking about those things, then that potential for economic growth goes untapped, right? So we're not supporting that person in creating that business or accessing that career that they really want, pushing them towards economic opportunities that might not fit their needs or their desires or their skills or their strengths. So it's really, really important to talk to folks about, what excites them, what economic opportunities that they see in their life and that they want to access in their life. And just general inequalities around money go unnoticed and unchecked. And that can also happen in the workplace, right? So if we're not talking about how much folks are getting paid, then we might not realize that, there is a gap in salaries or wages. This happens a lot when women start talking to men about how much they're getting paid. And they start realizing that they might be doing the same job but getting paid different amounts. And if we're not having those conversations and being open about these conversations and having them in a way that feels safe and conducive, then a lot of inequalities around money can go unnoticed or unchecked. We also miss opportunities to heal financial trauma. So economic abuse can feel like such a scary personal experience, but if we're not talking about it, then we might not even understand how to even begin to heal it. And what I mean by that is maybe it happened to you in your household when you were growing up. You saw your parents have a very economic abusive situation. You yourself might still be saddling a lot of those feelings, whether it's conscious or subconscious, but really creating dialogue around finances and financial trauma can really help folks begin to talk about it and begin to address it in a way that is meaningful for them. And financial conversations don't have to be scary. So these are some guidelines that we want to kind of give to you all to talk about finances, either with a colleague or with a client. But one of the best things that you can do is be upfront as possible as to why you are asking the questions that you are and for what purpose. So for example, if you're sitting with a client and you're going to talk to them about how much money they make in a month, being very clear about why you're asking those questions. So I'm asking these questions because I want to see if there's anything I can do to support you create more income, or I want to support you in figuring out what is the best, or I want to support you in figuring out how or when is the best time to buy a car or, get an apartment or whatever it is. Be very upfront as possible. And that includes I am asking these questions to see if you still qualify for this benefit, right? Because that can be really scary for folks, and a lot of times survivors are so used to, having to talk about certain things for public benefits. So it's really important to be upfront when we're going to actually do an evaluation of whether that person's financial information qualifies them for a benefit, because in the back of their mind, that's probably what they're thinking you're doing. And if that's not what you're doing, or it is what you're doing, it can make the conversation a lot less scary if you're just honest about why those questions are being asked. To help folks feel like they have power over their own finances, try not to push anything related to finances that person might not want. This includes public benefits, work placement, budgeting, anything. So it's extremely difficult for survivors who've experienced a lot of economic abuse to feel like they are able and sufficiently able to talk about and create financial wealth for themselves. So it takes time to get there, right? And sometimes a person who they see as an authority figure telling them to do certain things related to finances mimics some of that abuser, harm doer, survivor relationship. And if that person has experienced financial trauma, they might be just say yes to anything that you suggest related to finances. They might not know how not to say no or say that they feel uncomfortable. So being very open about these are just suggestions. You can say no, which is the next one. So give folks the option to answer, to not answer, to say no, or to turn down certain services or support is very, very important in helping that person build up financial autonomy. So what they mean by that is their ability to make their own financial decisions. Ask their permission to review any financial information or documents that they share with you. So again, they might feel like they need to share these things with you because they see you as an authority figure, but still allowing them to give you consent or permission for reviewing them, even if they printed it out, or if you've already requested or talked about it. If you're in that meeting and they have brought them to you asking for permission again, things could change from the last time you talked to this time. You really want to build that relationship around finances that is mutual and trusted, and that power feels a little more leveled. So asking permission for reviewing any financial information is very helpful. Try to stay away from jargon or acronyms. Jargon and acronyms can be very, very scary, and that can be anything like, have you thought about having like investing in stocks? That's something that folks who maybe have never really talked about finances with anybody can be really scary and can make them feel like, I don't even know what that means, and can help can create some risk between you and the client. So really try to think about how do I explain financial concepts in the most basic way, in a way that folks can really understand, and you can practice with colleagues, you can practice with your family, to see what ways can you explain certain financial concepts so that anybody can understand them. Be consistent and follow through. So if you are working with somebody on career development or budgeting or creating a savings plan, whatever it may be as consistent as you can. I know it can be difficult when we're managing so many different folks and supporting so many different folks, but keeping note of all the things that you agree to support somebody with. So, next time we're going to review your budget, and making sure that you remember that you said that can be really, really helpful in creating that trust and kind of helping feel like that relationship is a little more balanced. Understand that sometimes conversations will have nothing to do with finances. So it's very common for us to walk into a coaching session. So we coach survivors, and we have coached survivors. Now we coach service providers. But sometimes we walk into thinking this meeting is going to be about budgeting, and we've talked about it. The last week we talked about how we were going to budget this week. But what maybe ends up happening is that person tried to budget, and things, started to be unraveled, and experiences and memories started to come to that person. So now what we may be talking about is some financial experience that they had when they were a child. And just because we agree to talk about budgeting doesn't mean that that's what needs to happen. And sometimes we need to allow these conversations to just kind of happen, and give them space so that we can eventually get to something like a budget. Budget can be very, very scary, especially when you've experienced economic abuse. So remember how I mentioned that economic and financial monitoring is one of the ways that folks exert economic abuse. Sometimes a budget can feel like that, whether you're doing it by yourself or with a service provider or with a colleague. It can trigger a lot of those memories of economic abuse. So sometimes you will come in with an idea of how you're going to support this person, but whatever happened in between triggered some memories, triggered some experiences, and having space to talk about those is just as important, and that helps you to eventually get to those conversations that can be around budgeting or saving or whatever it may be. Be open to children being with the client. I know this can feel really weird and icky sometimes, but if that person doesn't have child care, or your organization doesn't offer child care, then sometimes the child may just have to be there, obviously reminding the person, are you okay with this child hearing these things, and trusting that that person is making the best decision for them and their child can be a great way to create a safe space to have these conversations. Be flexible with scheduling and cancellation. So folks have a lot going on. Work may come up, a court case may come up, doctor's appointment, therapy, whatever it may be, but things come up for survivors, and being flexible with scheduling can help really support that person in creating a safe relationship with you around finances. Make wealth and wellness meaningful. So what this means is that wealth and wellness means different things for different people. So for somebody that might mean I have an abundance of money and never have to struggle again in the day of my life. For some people, that just means I just want a place to live and to feel safe. For some people, that means I want to be able to cover any of my medical costs and not be worried about it. It really means different things for different people. For some people, it means community. Having an abundance of community can feel like wealth and wellness. So just making wealth and wellness meaningful for that person, and centering all conversations on what that person sees as meaningful can be really helpful. So now we're going to ask some questions, and I'm sorry that all of these are showing up as one. I think that was a little mistake that carried over. Sorry about that. But what does wealth mean to you as a service provider, as a person? And then what does wellness mean to you? And how are wealth and wellness intertwined in your life? So take a couple moments to answer these for yourselves, and then kind of envision what having this kind of conversation with a client or with the person that you're supporting might be like or might feel like. So this is some ways that you can screen for economic abuse and start to safety plan around finances. Ensuring that you ask about finances during intake can be really helpful. So this might include previous work employment, future aspirations, access to money. So do you have access to money? Do you have any money on you right now? Do you have a bank account? They say no, understanding why that they don't have that bank account. Again, that might give you some insight as to, are they experiencing economic abuse? Is that lack of access something that they actually have control over? Do they have bank accounts? All that stuff. How they feel about their current financial situation. How you can help them feel more financially secure. Pulling a credit report can help flag any fraudulent debt that can get worse as time passes. So credit reports are very scary, sometimes don't make a lot of sense. But if you as a service provider can get comfortable with pulling a credit report, and we'll talk a little bit about how Freefrom can support you in that, then that can really be helpful. Banking safety, so that means setting up new accounts of meeting, changing people's passwords, changing who has access to those bank accounts early on can really help that person ensure that economic abuse doesn't continue to happen while that person is being supported by you. So any bills, so changing addresses, removing anyone who could cause harm, again, for similar reasons, not allowing that economic abuse to happen. And reporting fraud. So if any fraud is reported to you, supporting that person in reporting fraud to creditors, to companies, to credit card companies, to, like, let's say it happened at Macy's or Target or whatever it may be, starting to report some of that can really be helpful. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Freefrom and what we do and how we can support you in investing in Survivor Wealth and Wellness. So the first thing that we offer is a Survivor Wealth and Wellness certification, which is essentially works to integrate financial capacity building services into the gender-based violence movement by investing in your staff. So by investing in service providers doing the work. So we really want to support service providers in feeling financially secure themselves, feeling financially confident, so that they can better support clients and the people that they are supporting day to day. So our intention is to provide support and for you as a service provider to heal and create wealth and create safety so that you can support other folks in doing the same. This program is ideal for organizations working to address gender-based violence movement, and it's tailored towards CEOs, executive directors, managers, advocates. But we really, really recommend that at least one director or C-level staff participate in this training, because that's really when we start to see the work integrated throughout the organization. Another way is by creating a survivor-centered workplace. So what that means is, and this is just very brief, but what that can look like is hiring practices. So again, remembering that sometimes work environments can allow for these power and control dynamics that we see in abusive relationships. It feel like that, it can look like that, it can actually very much be a real power and control situation. So one of the places where this happens is hiring. So traditional hiring processes can be intimidating. So considering easing up on hiring requirements and work with HR to ensure that your hiring process is survivor-centered can be really, really helpful. So that can look like how we ask for resumes and applications. So a lot of folks that we've talked to who are survivors receiving services are like, well, I don't understand why I'm getting asked for a resume and then an application where I have to rewrite everything I just wrote in the resume. And that alone takes a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time, and, just causes more issues, and maybe that person is now discouraged in applying. So thinking about how can we streamline that a little bit more. Interviews can feel very intimidating. It's a person of power asking you questions about yourself. So how can we create an interview process that feels safer, that feels less intimidating? Requiring business casual attire or penalizing somebody for not having business casual attire can also feel like something that we can do to create a more survivor-centered space. And references, understanding that sometimes survivors don't have references. And the reason why I put this here is because a lot of survivors end up working in the movement, right? So how can we as movement leaders and as people working in the movement create hiring processes within our organization that are a little bit more survivor-centered and start to create a safe place for survivors to heal from the moment that they start thinking about working with us. Compensation and benefits is really, really important in creating a survivor-centered workplace. So what this may look like is what is the living wage in your state or city, and you can click this link to find out what it is. But paying a living wage can really give people a lot of access to financial services, to wealth, to housing, to a lot of great things that can be supportive to them. What other benefits can you offer, like child care, paid leave to handle any issues that come up related to gender-based violence? So ensuring that if somebody discloses I'm experiencing gender-based violence, that they don't lose their job over any time that they need off to handle whatever's happening because of that. Ample part-time off, health care, all these things can help a person really achieve that thriving stage that we talked about in the financial economic experience model. Next, we'll talk about a little bit about policy and advocacy. So Free From has something called a compensation compass, and it's available on our website at this link. And what this does is in a matter of minutes, the compensation compass makes the convoluted process of pursuing compensation accessible for survivors of gender-based violence across the country by equipping them with the information and step-by-step support that they need to seek economic justice for themselves. And information and guides are available for all 50 states. So people can go on our website, answer a couple questions about what kind of compensation they're looking for. So by compensation, we mean money, so money that they're looking to be compensated because of the abuse that they endured. Answer those questions, and at the end, they'll get step-by-step guides on what is available to them, whether that's victims of crime funding, whether that's small claims court, or whatever it may be. Those will be listed, and they will have a step-by-step guide on how to access that compensation. And I'm going to hand it over to Sabrina.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm just going to go over just a couple more things about Free From policy and advocacy and system change approach. And so one, we have our 50-stage strategy, which Free From will work in close partnership with state-based advocates across the nation to advance our top policy priorities, which are one, expand the definition of domestic violence to include economic abuse. This recognizes that if we don't have a clear definition of what domestic violence looks like, it can really prevent people from seeking economic justice. And then secondly, protected paid leave for survivors. You know, in addition to, you know, sick leave or vacation leave, if, you know, survivors need to take time off to deal with the consequences of their abuse, and they shouldn't have to tap into their sick leave because they're not sick to do so, they're not going on vacation. And we want to make sure that it's paid, because survivors you know, need to be financially secure. They shouldn't have to worry about, they shouldn't have to choose between going to work that day so that they can, you know, get paid versus, you know, going to a court order or trying to seek some other support. And then thirdly, increase access to civil remedies. This looks like criminal restitution, being able to sue the harm doer for the abuse that they've incurred. You know, if someone, for example, someone, you know, damages your property or does something, you have the right to sue that person that caused that damage. And so it's recognizing that, yes, survivors should be able to seek civil remedies to recoup the cost of the harm that's endured to them. And then we just recently launched, in the next slide, a Survivor Wealth Policy Group. This is an innovative group that brings together diverse organizations and entities from across the nation to discuss strategies and share resources to advance survivor wealth-centered policies in every state in the U.S. So that's in addition to our top 3 policy priorities that I mentioned on the previous slide. The Survivor Wealth Policy Group creates a strong network of advocates that sparks policy innovation within the movement and elevates survivor wealth into the national conversation. We actually have our next meeting March 11th. So if you're interested in joining or learning more, we'd love to have you. If you, for example, are doing policy advocacy work but want to learn how to incorporate survivor wealth-centered policies in the work that you're currently doing. If you're working on with your clients and thinking about how can we better inform policies, we'd love to have you as well. So I'll hand it back over to Tanya.
Thank you, Sabrina. Another thing that we're launching is called Survivor Peer-to-Peer Financial Support Groups. So we know that survivors are their best resource and know exactly what they need to thrive. Keeping that in mind, we are excited to launch survivor-led peer-to-peer financial support groups to reduce isolation, build community power, and increase or maintain the financial wellness of survivors in a peer-to-peer setting. These groups are completely community-driven, and we are reaching out to survivors around the country to start their own groups in their community. So all you really need to get started on a group is survivors find 2 to 8 survivors in their community. They let us, so Free From staff, know how many will be participating, and we'll send them a welcome kit, which includes a guidebook with optional group discussions, activities, and a resource list. Then they pick a location and a meeting time. It's pretty simple, and the whole idea behind this is that we want to offer a place for survivors to receive support in places where maybe an organization might not be there to support them, or maybe they don't feel comfortable walking into an organization, or they haven't left the situation but still want to start creating financial wealth and wellness. So these community-based groups are really there to support survivors everywhere. So if you're interested in starting one or to promoting this to the folks that you support, please reach out to our colleague, Jackson, who's not on this call, but their information is here and will be at the end of the presentation as well. Additionally, we have our Survivor Wealth Summit happening this summer. So the Survivor Wealth Summit is a 2-day convening bringing together survivors, gender-based violence movement leaders and activists, asset builder experts, funders, policymakers, and key stakeholders to innovate, cross-pollinate, and build an ecosystem to support financial security and long-term safety for everyone. In addition to panel discussions and breakout sessions, agenda will be coming soon. Attendees can sign up for on-site services including career coaching, resume building, interview prep, small business coaching, and business planning. Financial coaches will be there to have individual financial coaching sessions. You can get professional headshots taken, support with your logo and a business card design and printing. You can get tech support for a business that you're starting or your nonprofit. And for more information about the summit or to purchase tickets or to apply for Survivor Scholarships, the Survivor Scholarships are available. And those scholarships are really for folks who identify as survivors and are not working in the movement, can apply or find more information on our website, which is listed here. So we are towards the end of our presentation. So before we close up, I want to do a grounding. And what this is really to honor the feelings, the thoughts, the memories, and ideas that came up in this webinar. So I want you to write them down, draw it with them, make a to-do list, give them space in whatever way is meaningful to you. You can talk to them about them with someone. If you have a colleague who joined this session, you can talk to them. And then take a couple deep breaths and think through your last thoughts. I'll give you a couple moments for that. Thank you, everybody. So thank you all so much for joining. I know we packed a lot of information here, but hopefully there's some files down below that you can download with more information about the Survivor Wealth and Wellness Certification. There is one pager that tells you all the different ways and who to contact to work with Free From. And then, of course, the slides that we went over today are available in the file box below. Stay connected with us. You can check out our website. You'll find all the things that we talked about there. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our contact information, so my name is Tanya Ventura. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and then my email is here, as well as Sabrina's email and M. Jackson's email.
Thank you, Tanya and Sabrina, very much. This was really very useful. We've been taking notes like crazy back here. We have some questions, and we'd love for your input on some of these questions. So the first question we have is, at what point during this process when working with survivors is a deeper dive done to address a survivor's relationship with money beyond economic abuse? So when an advocate is working with a survivor and the survivor is doing a lot of the yes, but, and there appears to be putting up some barriers, is there any point in this process where there's opportunities for that deeper dive to take a look at what some of the other challenges might be with their relationship with money?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish it was like a one answer that I can give you to solve that, but unfortunately it's a little more complicated, and it really depends on the person. But I can tell you that, let me try to go back to the economic experience model, that for the first two stages, which is survivorship, crisis and survival, folks who are survivors and seeking services at an organization. Sorry, I don't know what that noise was. Typically, in those two stages, they're not yet ready to receive healing services for themselves. In those two stages, if they have children, their priority is getting their children those services. When we really start to see that shift is around growth. So once that adult starts feeling like they have more financial autonomy and a little more financial stability, that's when they start actually coming to us and asking for support with healing whatever is coming up for them. Maybe they themselves are now ready to go to therapy on their own without their children, or are now able to go to the doctor for themselves, so that we really start to see that shift once they feel a little bit more economically stable, housing is stabilized, all of that becomes more stable. And that's when they really start asking us for support with that. So I would say keep an ear out for when that person is starting to want to have those conversations versus when we want to have those conversations as service providers. And keep in mind that other financial challenges may be having an impact on that person's ability to focus on themselves at that moment.
Great. Thank you so much. So can you give some examples or one example of how an advocate might support a survivor to get out of debt, build credit, et cetera? Like something just, I know, quote, simple example of what that conversation might be?
So how can somebody help a client get out of debt?
Yeah, so somebody said, I need to get out of debt. How would that conversation begin?
Yeah. So again, it really begins when that client starts to kind of notice that this is becoming a need. So this conversation often starts happening when a person is trying to find an apartment, when a person is trying to get a car, and they realize how important credit is. And then that's really when we see them come to us and wanting to talk about debt. So that's one way, when somebody has a clear financial goal related to credit or to debt, that you can make that conversation a lot more meaningful. So wonderful, you want a car or you want an apartment. These are all the things that we need to have in place. We need to make sure that you have enough income to support that purchase. We need to take a look at your debt and look at your credit score. Are you comfortable doing that? What feels the safest to do first? Maybe it is look at the credit report. Maybe it's starting with budgeting. But that's really how it begins to happen. Another way is at intake. So at intake, we can ask if they know if they have any debt, and it really explaining what that is. So that's money that you may owe a company, a bank, or a friend. And then that can be an opportunity to start talking about debt. And debt can take some time to start addressing, but you can start staging it early on. And as you build the relationship with the person, consistently offer support in addressing it.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we have is, how do we navigate cultural barriers in attempting to mitigate financial trauma with survivors when simply bringing up finance matters is considered a taboo topic?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one. I think having to identify or who are part of that community work with survivors is key in many aspects of helping that person find meaningful services. But if that's not available, just trusting that that person is being honest with you, letting them know, these conversations might be happening, being very upfront that these conversations are going to take place, or if you are mandated to ask a couple financial questions, that is why you're asking. But really allowing that person to kind of grow into a space where they can talk about it. It can be a cultural shock to a couple people, but as they start, to become more part of communities, and as they begin to heal more, they'll start realizing, oh, these conversations actually are a little more common than I expected, and might even start coming to support with like, hey, I'm uncomfortable about this, but I know it's important, like, can we maybe take it baby steps and go from there? But I think always noticing this person is uncomfortable with these conversations, why might that be? And backing off that conversation if you need to, or saying like, hey, I'm noticing you're uncomfortable. What part of this conversation could have made you feel that way, and how can we start addressing that discomfort can be very, very critical in having financial conversations.
Great, thank you. We have another question. How closely do you work with the elder abuse community, in particular with advocates that are working with elders who are being financially abused, because that's one of the very common forms of abuse?
Yes, absolutely. So elders are one of the big groups that experience economic abuse. So we don't specifically work with clients, but we do work with service providers working with varying folks. I don't know if any of the folks that we're currently training exclusively work with folks who are of the elder community, but I do know that we do train and coach a couple service providers who are the dedicated person at that organization working with elders.
Okay, so do you recommend that folks who are on this call that are engaged with the elder abuse community do a deeper dive into the work that you're doing to help them?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that we're also want to learn from you as an organization who is maybe specializing in that. There are so many nuances to economic abuse and how to address it, and there are many different strategies on addressing it, so I would love to have a conversation and see if, this working together might be a good relationship for both of us.
Great, thank you. And you may have mentioned this, so my apologies for this is a question coming from me. And do you have a very specific toolkit that you provide to advocates? I'm thinking of the different toolkits that are available for service providers at a Family Justice Center and multi-agency centers throughout the country. So can you talk a little bit about a toolkit or what you have as resources for advocates to access?
Yeah, so the Survivor Wealth and Wellness Certification Program, which I'm trying to get to, is a year-long relationship that we have with organizations who want to start doing a lot more financial capacity building work. And what we offer folks there is an e-course, which is an online course on the economic experience model that we've developed and what strategies best work, and a deeper dive into those strategies. So folks are going to learn about career building, how to resume build, how to career build with the survivor, how to promote entrepreneurship and support entrepreneurship with survivors, how to have a financial coaching relationship with a survivor. But at the same time, the service providers are receiving financial coaching, so they get 6 one-on-one financial coaching sessions with us. So each staff member that signs up for that, or each organization who has staff members participating in it, each of those staff members will get 6 coaching sessions to either talk about their own financial challenges, their own financial goals, or talk through client scenarios that they want our support with related to finances. They also receive a resource guide specific to the city or the state that they live in, and they receive ongoing communication and education from us for a year to support them in really integrating financial capacity building.
Great, thank you. We have a question here. I'm going to read it. It says, I am in California and supporting a survivor in Florida. my goddaughter. She left the abuser years ago but is still struggling financially. Do you do individual counseling with people who can't come to the LA Summit, Survival Summit, and who may not be able to start a peer support group yet?
Unfortunately, right now, we don't have the capacity to work individually with survivors. So we are a very small group of 11, and we work nationally. There's only 2 people on my team who do coaching with service providers. So the way that we're hoping to eventually tackle that is that we train organizations all over the nation so that any gender-based violence organization doing this work can offer that kind of one-on-one support to survivors, like on site. So I would love to connect with folks in Florida if they are interested in doing this work so that we can get some support for this person. But unfortunately, at the moment, we do not do individual coaching with survivors.
Okay, thank you. Shifting back to the certification program, somebody asked the question, how much is the program? Is there a fee with the certification program?
Yes, so good question. So it costs $3,000 per person. And the way that some organizations pay for that is sometimes that organization has dedicated funds that are supposed to go to staff development, general operation funds, or training. Sometimes we co-apply for grants to support that cost, or sometimes we have grants in certain cities or states that we are looking for organizations to provide that training for free. So if you are interested, let me know, email me, and we can definitely talk through some of those options for paying that fee.
Great, thank you. So we have something here, and I'll read it, and then I'm going to ask you about it. So one of our participants says that Starbucks has a fantastic support system called the CUP Fund, Caring Unites Partners. Employees can donate a portion of their pay into the fund voluntarily. If you face a hardship, the CUP Fund provides a grant to get you what you need. While it is short-term based, it can help for those immediate needs that may put folks into a tailspin. Have you heard of this program? And if so, can you offer some more information about it?
I have not heard of this program, but this program sounds amazing. And that's like something that, you know, family justice centers, organizations, and honestly every employer should adopt, because that sounds like an amazing way to really support somebody through an emergency. And can really make a difference in that person creating financial security or not. So that sounds like an amazing program, and thank you so much for letting us know. We'll definitely look into them.
Yeah, that sounds great.
That's something that can be replicated.
And then same person also just wanted to let everybody know that I guess New Jersey passed legislation for PTO when people need to go to family court. So that's amazing for those folks that are involved in a domestic violence situation where it's going to pull them out of work because they have to tend to court needs and things. So that's wonderful to hear.
Right. Hi, this is Sabrina. Thank you so much for sharing. You know, if whoever wrote that, if you can just let me know if you viewed I was working on it or know the organization, it'd be really great to maybe have them be a part of the Survivor Wealth Policy Group.
Thanks, Sabrina. We have another question. Can you talk more about connecting survivors to jobs and helping them overcome the challenges that accompany compromised credit, like what resources are out there, things like that?
Can you repeat the credit part again? Sorry, that part got a little cut off.
Oh, yeah, sure. So can you talk more about connecting survivors to jobs and helping them overcome the challenges that accompany compromised credit? Like what kind of resources are available to help with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would have to learn a little bit more about where you are. But I think employment for survivors can be a very difficult thing to navigate. One of the best, easiest things that you can do is asking that survivor about work experience in a way that, you know, doesn't shame them if they don't have any work experience. But that really opens the door to understanding, you know, what skills, what passions does this person have. At Free From, we have a magical equation, and it's skill plus passion equals what your income avenue should be. So we really like to talk about career or even entrepreneurship development with starting, what are you passionate about? What are you good at? Which might be difficult for survivors to answer. So sometimes we say, like what do you do a lot for your family or for your community? And then they'll be like, well, I'm really good at taking care of kids, or I really enjoy cleaning, or I really enjoy organizing, or I really enjoy getting people organized. And that really starts telling you a little bit about what kind of career options or entrepreneurship options may be available to that person, and then really help them in learning about that industry and supporting them in entering that industry. So it really looks different for each individual person, but I would encourage you to start with, what excites you, what are you good at, what are your skills, what are your passions, do you have any educational background that we should know about? And that's really going to help you navigate some of the resources out there. For folks that don't want to go through the normal career route, there's a website called Upwork, which we love to refer folks to, and that's a website where folks can do contract work. So maybe they want to become a digital transcriber or translator for a month and see how that goes. That's where they can find a project like that. And a lot of that can be done from home, as long as you have a laptop or access to a laptop or a computer. So that's one website that we often refer folks to. That's a national resource. But others would really depend on what city or state you are. And if you do the certification program, you would receive a list of what resources are in your city or state.
Thank you. Just part of a follow-up. So I love the fact that you're engaged, that you're encouraging engaging survivors in this conversation so that you can learn more about what their passions are, what they're interested in, are where their experience is. So for that, so in that conversation, then if you're working with somebody who has ideas and pathways on, they know what kind of job they want, they know what their career path is, how do you help them tackle some situation when they've got just really severely compromised credit? So having an idea of what you want to do is great, but then there's that barrier of trying to figure out, okay, my credit is just the worst. What do I do?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things you can do. One of them is if there's any fraud, then addressing that fraud and starting to report that fraud is really important. Addressing fraud for a survivor can be very difficult and can take a lot of time, and that's because a lot of credit bureaus don't see any fraud that happened while you were in a relationship as fraud. They're like, well, you're in a relationship with this person. We have no way of knowing that, you didn't benefit from that credit, which is honestly not a great practice, but we encourage advocates to be on the phone with the person who's talking to the creditor, sending letters to the creditor as an advocate, supporting your client's story of this is fraud. A lot of times they'll ask for a police report. A lot of the police stations that we've talked to don't want to do police reports around credit fraud. So sometimes letters from advocates can really help that survivor in addressing that fraud, or emails from advocates, or even a call from an advocate. So that's one first step if that exists. Another one is building income. Building income really allows you to have money to pay for debt. So the debt that you can pay off can start getting addressed. If some shelters have, or some organizations have money that they can use to give grants to support folks in paying off debt, or paying off utility bills that went unpaid because, they were fleeing harm, that's a great way to support them in addressing some credit. Once somebody has enough income so that they can start regularly making payments, looking at, can we take out a very small loan to kind of help you show that you've paid off a loan completely, that can really help boost a credit score. We are a Lending Circle provider. We're only able to offer Lending Circles here in LA. But lending circles are offered to our training organizations, so the organizations that are being trained or our Survivor Wealth and Wellness certification partner. We offer them lending circles, which are small, no-interest loans, community loans, that help survivors or people on average see an increased credit score from 40 to 120 points. because they're low interest. They are for a specific time. For example, we have a lending circle right now that's 7 people, and those 7 people are in a lending circle for $700. So they're giving $100 each every month. So every month there is a pot of $700 that goes to somebody. So, this month it's going to go to Mary. Next month it's going to go to John. And at the end of the 7 months, it shows up on your credit report as a fully paid off loan, which can increase your credit score. So that is something that Free From offers for folks in LA, and we hope to be able to offer that nationally sometime soon. But we're piloting that right now. So there's a couple different things that we can do. And again, that coaching is offered specifically for you if you are a Survivor Wealth and Wellness partner.
Perfect. Thank you. So we only have a couple of minutes left. We actually have one more question, but we're going to actually email that question to you because I'm guessing there's going to be a longer explanation on how to resolve this, so we'll email the question to you. But again, I want to thank you and Sabrina so much for all the information you provided. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on a Monday. We hope that the information in this webinar was helpful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. A few reminders again, our conference is in May, so register, go online, and save your hotel room and get your space for this wonderful conference. Our next webinar is on March 17th, Tuesday, March 17th, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, How to Start a Family Justice Center 101 with Casey Gwen and Gail Strack, who will spend time giving you the basics of a family justice center and all of the really important steps to start this discussion in your communities. Again, as a reminder, the presentation has been recorded and will be posted on our website soon, and you will receive an email with instructions on how to download it and access your certificate of attendance. So thank you again. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon.